RWBY's fights are amazing. Well, most of the time. But if you ask anybody, they'll probably tell you RWBY's fights was one of the reasons that they got invested in the show in the first place. Whether it was the amazing original trailers, or if someone just showed them a fight scene out of context, or just by watching the show itself. Those fight scenes hooked a lot of people. So why don't we ever talk about them? Whenever I watch a review, they sort of quickly go over the fights. Give it a general, this was good, that was bad. Hardly ever do I see people going into deep detail reviewing the intricacies of the fight choreography. Which is crazy, because people will say things like, this was too fast, this was too slow, this looks ugly, this looks great. But there's clearly more going on here. It's the speed of the characters, the camera placement, the music choice, the abilities the characters have and use, the location of a fight, the setup to the fight. There's a lot going on in every single fight scene, so why not take a closer look at them? Rather than give it a broad statement or generalizations about the fight scenes, why don't we take the time to really dive into everything about a fight that makes it good or bad? Now, I asked my patrons what fight they wanted to see me cover, and I gave them some of my favorite fights from each volume. But unsurprisingly, they chose Volume 2's train fight. One of the best encounters the show has ever had. A total of 6 combatants inside the train, this truly felt like the real finale to the volume. Definitely a lot more fun than the grim attack in the episode afterwards. So let's dive into this fight, shall we? To help explain what I want to talk about, let's take a look at this shot of Dr. Oobleck hitting Zwei. This shot is really cool, but why is it cool? Well, lots of times when characters swing their weapons, they treat it like it's a greatsword, like it's extremely heavy, and they usually only do one large downward swing. Or they twirl their weapon around like it's made of plastic, like a Sailor Moon transformation sequence. This shot of Oobleck winding back and swinging his thermos like it's a baseball bat isn't a style we see in the show very regularly. It goes to show that even something as simple as how the character swings their weapon can make an attack look more interesting and stylish. After the hit, we pull the camera way far back, with the constantly moving background of the tunnel, and the quickly paced speed lines following Zwei as he rockets through the air. It not only conveys the idea that he's traveling very far, but he's also doing it very quickly. This extra little shot of him sticking his tongue out is just a cute way to show us, the audience, that he's fine with this hit and he's actually enjoying himself in the moment. We need to pay attention to the cinematography, animation, and the character context to understand why this shot worked so well. Now then, let's dive into the fighting inside the train. The girls get a moment to stop and plan ahead. If you have the time to let the characters set something up or establish their plans before the encounter actually starts, take advantage of that. No one wants to stop the fight in the middle of the action so the characters can explain something to each other. Having fun action interrupted with a slower pace can help build tension, but there's a time and place for when that should happen. You never want to interrupt the flow of a fight. Otherwise, rather than build up any tension, you're just gonna ruin your viewer's immersion. This scene really nails it by having Yang tell the others to go on ahead before readying herself to fight Neo. The music tips us off that the action is going to start back up again by building back up. And our tension gets released when we hear Yang's shot fire off and see Neo reacting to it. It's also smart of Yang to fire the shot because it forces Neo to block the hit, allowing Weiss and Blake to slip past her. It also shows us Yang is taking the initiative. No one wants to watch a fight where they just stand around waiting for someone else to get into battle-ready position. That could make the scene feel like it's rehearsed, ruining the viewer's immersion. Having Yang walk up to stand right next to Neo establishes how big of a size difference there is between our combatants, which ends up playing a major role in how Neo beats Yang. Yang, our big bad brawler, the badass who destroyed the paladin in one hit, now has to fight one tiny little girl, and I'm willing to bet she hasn't read David and Goliath. This also shows us how much Neo is toying with Yang. Neo is letting her get this close, something she didn't do before. The context of this moment only makes sense if we know the paladin fight from before, where when Yang attempted an attack on her and Neo vanished right before her eyes. Yang knows Neo can do this, but doesn't quite know the extent of Neo's capabilities. And while Yang is trying to figure her out, Neo gives her this shit-eating smirk. Neo's playing mind games with Yang this whole fight. She's showing Yang how confident she is, and at the same time, showing Yang she doesn't know what she's up against, because as Neo smiles, she blinks and her eyes change colors. Yang has no idea what this means, or how this ability of Neo's works. Neo is just trying to egg her on. And when Yang does throw her first punch, Neo blocks it easily. This sequence of events is perfect, by the way. We get a close-up of Yang's hand, showing us she's ready to fight. We then see Yang swing. We're this close to Yang because we're showing how close she is to Neo, who barely pops into frame before we cut to the next shot. A POV of Yang's hit heading straight for Neo, dead on. There's no way Yang can miss. She's this close to her, right? But at the same time, we see Neo smile mischievously. And the next thing we know, the camera has pulled us way back. It's not only showing us that Yang is recoiling from something, it's putting us in Yang's headspace. We were this close to Neo, now we're this far away, at a completely different angle too. This disorients us, and show us Yang has also been disoriented by this attack. This is the cinematography of the sequence, and I don't see enough people talking about cinematography when it comes to RWBY. Yang swung one punch, but it took us 4 different shots to convey everything we needed for this attack. This sequence would have been much different if it was only one long shot, and it probably wouldn't have been nearly as cool or memorable. When Yang is recoiling, we can also see Neo hasn't moved at all, yet when Yang rights herself, we see Neo has her umbrella up. This just further pushes Neo's trickery during this fight. Neither we, the audience, or Yang can quite keep track of her. Whether it's things like Neo changing between shots or keeping Neo off screen, this is an easy way to both confuse the audience and the characters. A shorthand for cinema, if the audience feels one way, they'll naturally assume the character feels the same. More importantly, it doesn't always work the other way around. This is where you'll have moments where the characters are laughing their asses off, yet you're not smiling. The audience needs to project their emotions onto the character, not vice versa. We get long enough of a shot to see Yang is pissed before we cut to the first real long take when it comes to choreography. We've pulled the camera back enough to keep the characters' knees and up in frame. This is because Yang attempts to hit Neo in many different areas, and more importantly, Neo evades all of those attacks. Even the slightest hip swing evades a punch from Yang. This sequence is pretty quick, but not in a way where I can't follow what's happening. I might want to go back and watch it again just to catch any of the extra little details. You have failed if your audience goes back to watch it again because they don't know what just happened, or if they got confused. That's the point where people start to say it's too fast. We cut to this wider shot more behind Yang. This is important because since we can see Neo more directly, it highlights her more, setting her up to finally counter Yang's barrage. As a side note, with this angle, it makes Yang look even bigger, and by comparison, Neo even smaller. This just highlights the struggle Yang is having. It doesn't matter how big you are or how hard you hit if you can't ever land a punch. After this volley of attacks, we change everything. As Neo spins, suddenly the camera is situated way behind Yang's back, almost breaking the 180 rule. The 180 rule is that the characters shouldn't switch sides on the screen, or else it'll disorient the viewer. You can, of course, break this rule if you know what you're doing, and this blow by Neo is a good example on how to do that. Neo has finally done a real attack. No dodges or blocks, she spun around and drop kicks Yang, sending her to the ground. Her first attack comes out of nowhere and floors Yang easily after evading 16 of Yang's attacks. By breaking the 180 rule, it really helped hammer home how unexpected the strike was. We get a quick shot of Yang on the ground, looking both helpless and small. Shots that aim low on someone makes them seem weak or sad, and this shows it. We also get to see that Yangry's getting angry. She started this fight pissed, and she's only getting more pissed. Worst of all, that sickening smile hasn't left Neo's face at all. Neo starts battering Yang. The two trade some more blows, both dodging and blocking various hits. Importantly, Yang never actually lands a single hit onto Neo, yet Neo lands plenty. Neo's entire strategy has been to dodge Yang's hits and then push Yang away from her. Neo is taking control of the situation by purposefully keeping herself out of Yang's reach. As Yang stands back up, we watch Neo do a front flip to get around Yang and out of our view of the camera. This is important for 2 reasons. First, it continues this notion that neither the audience or Yang can keep track of Neo, and second, it shows us some of Neo's personality. Neo didn't just run over to get to the side of Yang, she did an extra little flip. She's having fun in this situation. Yang stands up and has time to turn to find Neo, who's taking initiative and is charging Yang with her umbrella open. This is likely just to startle Yang, since the open-faced umbrella is more of a shield than an actual weapon. Yang's response is to launch a flame bullet, showing us that Neo's shield is fire resistant. Anyways, Neo opens her umbrella to push Yang's hand again, then uses its reach to push Yang another step backwards, once again making sure the two keep a distance away from each other. Yang, seemingly out of frustration, launches a big, slow attack which Neo easily dodged by jumping out of the way, ending the scene by showing off and doing a couple of extra flips and landing smugly on the crate behind her. This encounter shows us how Yang is clearly outmatched here. Yang has swung wildly, hardly ever pausing to take in everything Neo is doing, and Neo is waiting for the opportune moments to strike. Neo also figured out rather quickly that Yang has pretty poor range, and that's why Neo keeps distancing herself from Yang. Neo also realizes how easily she can block Yang's bullets with her umbrella. Honestly, due to Yang's hot-headed nature and lack of perception in this fight, it's pretty obvious she was doomed to fail. The music slows down and introduces us into the next segment, with Blake and Weiss continuing their run down the hall. Though it would be safe to say this is probably happening simultaneously to Yang's encounter with Neo. Anyways, the girls react to hearing Banesaw's chainsaw being dragged across the floor, which would honestly just fuck up the teeth of his saw, but it's dramatic, so whatever, I guess. It's important that Weiss lets Blake move past Banesaw, because honestly, it's better for the story. Realistically, the girls could have faced any of these opponents in any order they wanted. Blake could have fought Neo, Yang could have fought Banesaw, and Weiss could have faced Torchwick. But that wouldn't be very satisfying. But that wouldn't be very satisfying. Blake's had a grudge against Torchwick and the White Fang for this entire volume. These events are happening this way to serve a satisfying narrative. Sometimes when you ask, but why did the characters do it like this? The answer is easily, it made for a better story. Blake deflects Banesaw's attack for Weiss before running past him, letting Weiss get an attack of opportunity on him. So Banesaw swings, and Weiss does a very quick jab to deflect his attack. Weiss then does a confusing, unnecessary twirl to stand up and deliver a second jab that didn't seem to do much to stop Banesaw from continuing his action. Weiss turns back around, slashing down at him, causing him to stumble backwards. Her rapier bounces off of his weapon before the camera very suddenly shifts to being right behind Weiss. This camera shift isn't like the one with Neo blocking Yang's initial hit. This just disorients the viewer in a bad way. Weiss and Banesaw were over here, now suddenly they're layered on top of each other? It wasn't even a good shot to make Weiss look cool to move the camera around like this. This is a good example of how breaking the 180 rule can make the scene confusing to follow. She just moves her rapier back before we cut again to a similar shot as before, only lower to the ground, to show how Banesaw falls over from Weiss's uppercut strike. For a character like Weiss, who moves incredibly quickly and has the thinnest, hardest to see weapon in the main cast, moving the camera around all willy-nilly is the worst idea. After this, she stops and waits for Banesaw to stand back up with his weapon at the ready, seemingly just so he can say this dumb line.
Finally, I get to kill a Schnee.
This isn't the same as Yang sizing up Neo before they fight. Yang was coming into the encounter knowing Neo could evade her hit, and the fact Neo allowed Yang to get so close was a part of Neo's strategy. Yang was just approaching her target, expecting Neo to run or move or attack before she got this close to her. It's not the same here. Weiss has only just been introduced to this guy, who is way slower than she is. Weiss has landed several well-timed strikes on him and knocked him off his feet already. Weiss should have done something smart, like kick his chainsaw away and hold him down with a glyph. Neo is trying to distract Yang. After all, the villain's goal is to have the train crash into Vale. Neo is trying to run the clock. Weiss's goal is to stop the train, or defuse any bombs inside the carts. She has no reason to hang around wasting time fighting this guy. If she could end the fight now, she should. That's what Yang is trying to do with Neo. Banesaw isn't even trying to distract Weiss. He's obviously trying to actually kill her. By all accounts, Weiss should have ran from this fight, or Banesaw should have done something that stopped her forward path a lot better. Like I said, sometimes the answer is, it makes for a better story. But it's better if there's actual setup to explain why the events are happening. Otherwise, it just feels like the characters are doing these things because they read the script. Worst of all, we cut away from Weiss's encounter as she calmly readies herself to continue to fight him. Bitch, you are so much faster than he is. Run around this buffoon. We cut to Blake coming face to face with Torchwick. He gets to say his little quip, and she charges forward. It's funny that she runs to meet him, yet he sighs as he walks towards her. This could either be because he's planning on losing this fight so he can get arrested, or more likely, it's just because Roman finds fighting on his own accord to be tiresome, which is why he hires so many goons to do his dirty work for him. We see Blake unsheathing her weapon before cutting to a wide shot to show us what she's doing, making a fire clone and rolling past Roman. We then cut to a different angle of this event to show us that Roman wasn't expecting this. We then cut again to an opposite angle to have the explosion Roman causes blow up behind Blake as she completes her roll. Because explosions make people look cool. This angle also shows us how Roman gets flung overhead in the aftershock. Now, some of you might be thinking having this between 3 different shots wasn't necessary, and you might be right, but the point of rewinding a bit to show us her clone strike from a different angle served 2 different purposes, outside of highlighting how Roman didn't catch on to what was happening. One, it let the audience get to try to wrap their heads around what they just saw. This is the first time we see Blake use dust in her clones to give it an element. These shots are trying to help establish what the rules are with her clones doing this now. And 2, it's meant to represent the speed of how this all happened. The camera, and in turn your mind, is doing a double take to try to process what just happened. It shows us that it all happened very quickly, which was why Roman kept on swinging after her clone turned into an entire flame before his eyes. As Roman flies overhead, Blake jumps straight upward like a cat can do and volleys 3 quick smacks into him, launching Roman away from her in the process. Roman lands hard on his neck, which will suck, and he definitely needs to see a chiropractor now. As he continues to roll from this hit, we see Blake landing from the jump. She rights herself, brandishing her katana now. All before Roman actually gets back to his feet. Maybe that's why he doesn't like fighting on his own behalf. He's just not that good at it, and he's clearly no match for Blake's speed. Speed was the name of the game during this whole train fight. Oobleck and RWBY Speed against the Paladins, Neo Speed against Yang, Weiss's Speed against Banesaw. It's called theming. Anyways, Torchwick finally stands up and fires an easily seen and dodged bullet from his cane. Blake uses a stone clone to take the hit for her. Now, I'm sure she could have just easily jumped or rolled out of the way, but she specifically uses her clone again to show the audience what this is that she's doing. In case you didn't grasp the concept of the dust in her clones before, this should help sell the idea to you. It also shows us she's not just using fire, she's got a bunch of elements at her disposal here. That's why the bullet takes 3 different shots to reach and destroy her clone. The camera is trying to give you as much time as possible to see that this is one of her body doubles, especially since it was a little hard to see the first one with the fire effect on it beforehand. During this volley of strikes, the leitmotif for Blake starts playing. It's this little piano thing right here. It's to not only keep match with her rapid strikes, but it also helps remind us that this is a White Fang issue. It might also remind the audience of the past Blake has with Roman compared to the fight on the docks. Blake lands in a kneel from one of her twirls, and as Roman swings down to batter her, she suddenly changes into an ice clone to trap his cane in place. Blake flips away, and we see Roman has enough time to register what has happened to his cane before he looks up to see what Blake is doing next. So Roman and the audience should realize he is doing very, very poorly here. Blake lands, readies herself, and charges forward, unleashing an extra powerful built-up strike which knocks Roman over and shatters her ice clone in a very, very cool-looking shot. You could ask, why didn't Roman let go of his cane to avoid the hit? 1, there's definitely no way he's fast enough to actually do that, and 2, because this shot looks cool! Certain events can be forgiven if the product of those events leads to an extra epic moment. Roman embarrassingly smacks into the door of the next car before tumbling onto his back onto the floor, his cane bouncing away from him. As he starts to right himself, Blake is already there and holds him down. Because 100-pound teenagers can hold down fully grown men with just 1 foot, apparently. More importantly, I really think it's because this was the moment Roman realizes he had to change strategies. See, his goal is to have the train crash, something he knew he would get in trouble for with Cinder. Before all this malarkey started, this happened.
We're starting the train, but we're not finished. Do it, or you're finished.
And then later, Emerald and Mercury say this.
You don't think...
Sure looks Looks like it.
That's still days away.
Roman is hedging his bets and hoping he can get captured by the end of this and that Blake won't just kill him. Because he knows he's already lost. That's why he's trying to talk to Blake and waste her time with this flimsy excuse of, we're the same. He knows he's going to lose. He knows if he gets captured, Neo will be able to bust him out of jail. And this way, he won't have to get yelled at again. All he has to do now is vamp and waste as much of Blake's time as he can so the train still has time to crash into Vale. Because at that rate, he can consider what he's doing at least a minor success. Okay, so we cut back to Weiss, readying her weapon, and Banesaw charging her. Looks like Weiss isn't the only one doing unnecessary twirls. Whee! Banesaw's chainsaw hits her shield, and I will admit, it does look really cool when this happens. Weiss twirls upward to knock him off balance, where he builds a massive swing that she pushes out of her way with her rapier. We cut to another angle to see her twirl, but then cut to a different angle to see her strike from that twirl land, and it almost makes it look like she didn't actually hit him. As he's stumbling from that hit, she jump twirls into the air, yet we cut to a different angle again that shows her jumping again. She starfishes in the air and smacks Banesaw in the process. We then cut again to see Weiss landing in slow motion. There are so many cuts in this encounter that it makes Weiss's actions really hard to follow. I don't get it. It's not like this with Blake's fight or Yang's fight. It's only Weiss. It's not like we needed the cuts to make Weiss feel like she's moving faster. She's already one of the fastest fighters. Her weapon is fast already. Cutting every couple of seconds to completely different angles is hurting the flow of action. Also, why is her landing in slow motion? Wouldn't it be a lot cooler if her strike was the thing that got the glamour shot? Slowing something down is usually used to make something look cool, but this landing isn't even very impressive. Especially since how quickly we've cut from angle to angle, I don't even know if her jump was very impressive to warrant a cool landing in the first place. Banesaw swings his weapon and Weiss backflips underneath it, which is neat. See, when I actually see what's happening, this fight has some cool moves. As Weiss rights herself, she smacks him 3 more times, twirling each time, cutting to a different angle each time. She knocks him off his feet again. Remember, this is now the second time she's knocked this dude prone. And her response is to do a handstand over his body and land in front of him, where he and his weapon are facing. Why? She then waits for him to stand back up, and to do a little spin with his chainsaw so she can duck underneath it. Like, yeah, I'm ripping the segment of the fight apart, but it's just not good. Her actions are confusing and make no sense. It doesn't seem like she actually wants to win. If anything, it makes it seem like she actually wants to be losing in this fight. Like, look at this jump. She doesn't even do a jumping motion. She just kneels and then just moves straight upward. How Weiss doesn't vomit for doing all this spinning, I couldn't tell you. Off his feet for a 3rd time. Yay! As she's landing, we see Weiss readying herself with this opportunity. The first time we see Weiss actually doing something useful with her time as Banesaw stands back up from being knocked over. As he's readying himself, we see Weiss readying her time dilation, which is cool and fun. And I know some people think it's a ripoff of some Final Fantasy thing, and that's very clearly what Monty was inspired by. But it doesn't matter, it looks really cool. I can only theorize one reason why time dilation hasn't made a return in the show, and no, it probably wasn't copyright or legal issues or anything like that. It's because the characters already move at Mach speeds. Weiss's time dilation may be really fun to look at, but honestly it barely seems to affect her speed, since she's already going supersonic. We cut back to Banesaw reacting to Weiss's glyph, which I really think wasn't necessary and kind of ruined the flow of her time dilation, but whatever. Weiss kneels into a speedy run, and we see her lift her hand to summon a bunch of glyphs around Banesaw. We then get the best shot of this fight because the camera stays still long enough for me to actually appreciate what's happening. We watch Weiss bounce back and forth super quickly to batter Banesaw with a bunch of hits, landing 2 extra blows on him in midair for good measure too. He lands on his back, again, that's 4 now. Weiss tries pushing herself towards him, attempting a downward strike, but he rolls in time to avoid the hit. As he stands up, we go back into slow motion, implying Banesaw notices this was his opportunity to finally catch Weiss. I don't think it worked super well though, what with how long it takes for him to actually react and grab her, but the point still comes across. He grabs Weiss by her face, and we get to see how terrified she is, before he drops her into the ground with a huge swing. He tosses her limp body into the air, and as he swings his chainsaw right towards her, we cut away, leaving the audience in suspense, wondering how bad his damage was to her. Spoiler, having her just roll into the room with Blake and Torchwick was a letdown compared to how intense the shock was. We now finally go back to Yang and Neo. Yang approaches Neo, who's playfully curious at what Yang will do next. Again, she's toying with her here. Neo is trying to piss Yang off, and it's working. Neo twirls to counter what Yang's doing, and Yang has taken up a defensive stance, showing us that Yang is learning to be cautious with Neo's attacks, but Neo is done with letting Yang take the initiative in this fight. I never noticed that she keeps one leg up as she does this. Weird. Yang jumps up to throw a wild haymaker, but Neo's umbrella was still up, so Yang should know that her hit wouldn't do anything. Maybe she was just trying to knock Neo over while her leg was up. Anyways, it doesn't work, and as Yang lands, Neo twirls around, and this close-up on her face implies she's ready to do something. She's done playing with Yang, and is ready to finish things. The two have a quick volley of strikes, all of which Neo evades or pushes Yang's hands out of the way, while also landing a couple more hits on Yang with her handle. She kicks, but we cut to Yang, who seems to have a plan. Yang reaches forward and grabs Neo's shoe. For the first time, Neo seems to be slightly off balance. Yang closes the distance between them and grabs Neo's leg and attempts to toss Neo. Neo, who has been proving to Yang this entire fight that she is a skilled acrobat, easily uses this forward momentum to land gracefully from this, because Yang was not paying attention or thinking strategically during this whole fight. When Tai says things like, "fight smarter," this is what he's talking about. Yang is fighting dumb here, and that's why she got her ass handed to her. She didn't pay attention to her opponent's strategies or abilities, and that's why she lost. Neo charges forward, and as Yang recoils to evade her, Neo grabs Yang's arm. She spins herself onto Yang's back and uses her other hand to grapple Yang's other arm, balancing on top of Yang. Neo spins herself with Yang's hand, forcing Yang's body to spin with her, which we get to see different angles of because that shit is crazy and looks awesome. Neo plants her foot onto Yang's back and then pulls herself away from Yang into a backflip off of Yang's back. In the process, she hooks her other foot into Yang's shoulder and uses this momentum to flip Yang up into the air, where Neo lands gracefully on her hand and Yang gets thrown into the roof of the train car, knocking her unconscious. I don't know if someone could actually do this in real life, but it looks real here. It looks cool, it looks like it could totally be plausible, and it's awesome. This is the point where the fighting really stops. Blake kicks Torchwick unconscious, grabs her friend, and runs away from the crazy-ass dude with a chainsaw, like how Weiss should have done from the beginning. I could go on, but this is already a whopping 10 pages long, so I think I'm good. Each of the different fights is a lot of fun to study because they show us what to do and what not to do when it comes to characters' actions and camera placement. Blake's fight with Roman does a great job showing off her new ability in a way that the audience can easily figure out what she's doing. Yang vs. Neo is a fun look at how camera placement can put you in the headspace of certain characters during an encounter, while on the other hand, Weiss's fight shows how an overactive camera can be a detriment to the flow of action. And most importantly, all three fights show us how a speedy character can fight a non-speedy character, whether they win or lose. I hope you had fun, and maybe it'll give you something to think about. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you liked it. Shout out to my $10 patrons. You're all amazing. Nako, Michael, James Dodds, Cool Duck, Andrew, Ramiel, Valhalla Knight, Chamomile, G Extreme, Classy Critic, Surge, Dakota D, Taj, Boulder Off Bros, Noah Perkins, and Sunny Shy. This was a long one. I actually wrote the script, and it was 12 pages long, and then I recorded half of it, and I was like, I hate my script, so I stopped and I changed it all up, I trimmed it down to 10, and then I kept recording, and maybe you can hear in my voice, but my throat is tired. I've been talking for so long now. But I hope you liked the video, I hope you had fun with it. What do you think of this fight? What do you think of any, specific, the choreography of the fighting animation, any cinematography, or anything about the characters that you want to talk about? Any and all thoughts and opinions, leave them in the comments below. I would love to see them. If you have suggestions for other fights I could look at, I'd love to see those too. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Oh, my throat.